I'm David Rolnick, and I'll be talking about AI and climate change. I don't think the topic of climate change needs much introduction. We're increasingly seeing its effects globally, and they're becoming both more frequent and more severe. It's worth noting also that climate change serves to exacerbate existing inequities, and it has a disproportionate impact on already disadvantaged communities. Climate change is caused by greenhouse gas emissions, which are a result of human activities, primarily carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. We need net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, according to the UN IPCC, yet every year emissions continue to increase, not only not decreasing to zero, but actually increasing. Now, climate change involves two things: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation means decreasing greenhouse gas emissions. Adaptation means responding to the effects of climate change. With that context, let's dive into how artificial intelligence and climate change interplay with one another. 10 minutes is too short to really do justice to the topic, but we'll provide a quick overview of 4 different ways that the two interact. Let's dive into the first one: how AI can be useful in certain cases in accelerating climate change mitigation and adaptation. This is something that my own research group works on, and it cuts across a lot of different application areas and sectors. Let's look at 4 different themes for how AI can be relevant in climate action. First is in distilling raw data into actionable information that can be useful to policymakers or other decision makers, for example. Many of these applications include remote sensing based upon satellite imagery or aerial imagery, for uses such as monitoring deforestation, understanding the built environment better, working out where solar panels are or what the footprints and energy usage of buildings is, or assessing flooding or the risk of flooding in the event of extreme events to guide disaster response. There are also applications here in natural language processing, so processing text, for example, from corporate financial disclosures to understand better climate-relevant information there. Another overarching theme that we see is in forecasting, improving predictions. Some applications here are, for example, forecasting the supply and demand for electricity. Electricity from renewable sources often varies from moment to moment as the sun stops shining, goes behind a cloud, or the wind picks up or decreases. So since solar and wind power are variable sources of electricity, it is important to predict how much is going to be available at any given point, just as it's important to predict the demand to make sure that the electrical grid is balanced and there is enough supply to meet demand. Forecasting can also be useful in other contexts, like predicting crop yield in the event of extreme weather or a change in climate. Another overarching theme that we see is in optimizing complicated systems with many knobs that can be turned to increase their efficiency. For example, in controlling building, heating, and cooling systems to make them more efficient, use less energy, or in controlling industrial operations to make them more efficient. Another application here is in routing freight, in particular between different modalities of freight to use more efficient modalities to the best of their ability. And then the final theme I want to touch on is in accelerating scientific modeling and discovery, which includes applications ranging from speeding up physics-based models of the climate itself, which are often very effective but prohibitively slow to run at scale. And so having faster AI-based approximations can be useful in speeding up certain portions of climate models. And likewise, in developing new materials, we can accelerate the process sometimes by using AI to learn from past experiments to design better materials for batteries, catalysts, or other situations. In all of these cases, AI is only one piece in the puzzle. It is not something that's magically going to solve climate change, and it requires strong partnership between many different fields and complementary stakeholders, and participatory design involving those who will be using and ultimately benefiting from the technology right from the start of the development process. For more information on this kind of area, I encourage you to check out our paper on tackling climate change with machine learning, which goes into detail in many different applications of AI for climate change mitigation and adaptation. Let's now dive into the second theme, AI applications that directly increase greenhouse gas emissions. There are many of these too, and I particularly want to highlight the ways in which AI is being used to accelerate fossil fuel exploration and extraction. It's been estimated that AI and advanced analytics will contribute to $400 billion of extra profit for the fossil fuel industry by 2025. And it's worth noting that this is not just work being done by fossil fuel companies alone. Many of the leading technology companies are partnering with fossil fuel companies in order to enable AI to accelerate exploration and extraction, and thus overall increase global greenhouse gas emissions. There are many other high-emitting sectors where AI is also being used to accelerate the industry and ultimately increase greenhouse gas emissions, areas like livestock farming or fast fashion. And it's also worth noting that AI is often used to optimize systems, but optimizing systems can mean lots of different things. And in particular, optimizing for cost, profit, is not the same as optimizing for reducing emissions. In settings, for example, where labor costs may outweigh energy costs, it may be more efficient from the perspective of an AI algorithm to transport some goods halfway around the world for reducing labor costs and then transport them back. That is optimizing a system, but it's not optimizing a system for what's ultimately best for society or best for the climate. For more reading on these kinds of areas, in particular applications of AI in the fossil fuel industry, I encourage you to check out Greenpeace's report on oil in the cloud. The third theme I want to touch on is AI applications with uncertain or systemic impacts. Obviously, most applications of AI are not specifically tailored to either areas that increase emissions or areas that decrease emissions or respond to the effects of climate change. There are many applications of AI that don't have necessarily as direct an impact on climate change, but that impact can still be very significant. For example, advertising recommender systems where AI is designed to boost consumption, which are probably greatly increasing global greenhouse gas emissions in more systemic ways by affecting people's behavior. There are also more complicated, uncertain effects of certain AI applications, like, for example, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, which can have many different effects upon climate change in the ways in which they are being used to augment or accelerate public transportation initiatives. They may be decreasing global greenhouse gas emissions, while in situations where they are being applied, that technology is being applied to personal vehicles, that could be increasing greenhouse gas emissions by increasing the viability of driving and the amount that people drive. Overall, it's unclear, though it is thought that probably autonomous vehicle technology will be net a contributor to climate change rather than helping address climate change. For treatment of these and other complex issues, I encourage you to check out our paper on aligning artificial intelligence with climate change mitigation, which really talks about many of these different factors and how they trade off against each other. Finally, let's touch on the emissions impacts of AI computation and hardware, irrespective of the particular application which the AI is being used to accelerate. Overall, the ICT sector contributed about 1.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions in 2020, of which about 2/3 of that was coming from operational energy, the compute itself, and 1/3 from the embodied emissions of hardware and other things. Now, 1.4% is not that much, and AI is actually still only some fraction of ICT. Google estimates that AI is about 15% of its server energy use, though that is not necessarily representative, and it's also a self-reported figure, so it should not be necessarily trusted that much. However, we can see a bit what kind of figures we're talking about here for the energy uses associated with AI compute and hardware. It is worth noting, however, that this is increasing. The biggest AI algorithms are getting bigger. They've gotten 300,000 times bigger since 2012. And even though some AI algorithms are much smaller than that, definitely the average AI algorithm is also getting bigger with time and requires more compute year to year. So overall, these are really important considerations to bear in mind, but they're also likely smaller than the application-related impacts, the negative impacts as well as potentially the positive impacts of AI. The ways in which AI is accelerating fossil fuel exploration and extraction are probably significantly larger than the compute impacts of those AI algorithms. It's worth noting that certain players may have an incentive to focus attention on the efficiency of computation rather than what algorithms are being used to do. This can be used as a diversionary tactic. We're working on green algorithms because our algorithms use green energy, even if maybe those algorithms are actually being used to do something that is extremely harmful for the planet or for society. So it's worth bearing in mind that when one's thinking about the ways in which sustainable AI is framed. If you're interested in issues related to the compute of AI algorithms, I encourage you to check out Green AI by Schwartz et al. In conclusion, we've looked at many different ways in which AI and climate change are related. We've looked at applications of AI that can accelerate climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. We've looked at applications of AI that are directly making climate change worse, applications with more systemic or uncertain impacts, and also the emissions impacts of AI computation and hardware. We've seen that AI can both help and hinder climate action. And its overall impacts are poorly understood and complex to measure, but they're likely quite significant, and importantly, they can be shaped by our choices. A couple things that I didn't get to mention earlier also, there are meta-level effects of the ways in which AI is framed. People are very eager for silver bullets when it comes to climate change, and oftentimes fancy new technologies can appear to be the answer, when really there is no single answer, and if there were one, it wouldn't be technology. Techno-solutionism is a danger when it comes to climate change, as with other things. Thinking of AI as the answer can distract attention from other lower tech pathways forward. And it can even enable deliberate greenwashing, where certain sustainability efforts seem more impactful than maybe they are, with a veneer of technology and AI. It's also worth noting that throughout all climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts, there are equity considerations. Fundamentally, climate change is an equity problem. And ways in which AI relates to climate action are intricately tied to these equity considerations. AI can exacerbate existing inequities in many different ways. The stakeholders who have power in the AI ecosystem, who have access to AI tools, are often biased towards certain geographies and institutions. The data used to develop AI algorithms is also biased. And the people who are controlling the ways in which AI is even being framed and applied are consolidated within certain established power structures. Thinking about climate change and climate equity really requires actively considering the ways in which AI is being developed and shaped. In conclusion, aligning AI with climate action means a lot of different things. And in particular, it means more than just adding some positive AI applications on top of business as usual. It means thinking very deliberately about our implicit and explicit choices throughout the development of new technologies, how we can develop these new technologies in ways that contribute positively to society, whatever those technologies are designed to do. Because ultimately, what all technologies should be designed to do is benefit people. Thank you.